This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Erie to Philadelphia and from Pittsburgh to Scranton, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined this particular week by Mr. Ed Arnold. Ed is the president of Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and of course he is a legend in Pennsylvania business, having run some of the largest trucking companies and logistical companies in the country with Arnold Industries and with New Penn Trucking. Ed, welcome back to the show.
Good to see you, Charlie.
Oh, it's good to have you for a new Arnold report.
Good. There's a lot going on right now.
There's much going on in the world, and just for 5 seconds, we are praying for the people of Ukraine and for peace to return as quickly as possible. You find that there's certainly has caused a lot of interest among our viewers, and we have some questions regarding that conflict and financial consequences. But let's get right to the questions that have been submitted. And you as viewers, you're welcome to send in questions. Send them to the email Chiron on the address on the bottom of the screen, and Mr. Arnold will address them in future episodes of the Arnold Report. Okay, let's start out right away, Ed. The first question is our viewer has asked if you would explain the difference between a credit union and a bank. What are the advantages and disadvantages of both institutions?
It is very interesting that at one time there was a substantial difference because the services offered by credit unions are very limited. Over the years, the government has changed the rules, and today the services offered are very little difference, and really there's very little difference between the two. The only differences really are banks are public for-profit companies, credit unions are owned by the members and are not for profit. That basically the other thing is your banks tend to have more branches and they tend to be a little more on technology and online services. Your credit unions, because they do have somewhat lower overhead, they basically will tend to give you maybe a little bit higher interest rate on your savings, and their loans may be at a slightly lower rate. That's it.
Well, that's interesting. I never knew that a credit union was nonprofit.
Yes, they always have been.
That's interesting. Number two, should I be transferring my money from my large national bank to one of my community banks? Which one will be a better bet to be able to keep my money safe in this era of scams and cyber attacks? What institutions qualify as community banks?
Well, one of the things that would qualify as community banks are credit unions because they're very similar to banks and they would be very more local. Your community banks are more, let's say, a state, operated in the state. Generally, they're regulated by the same now as the larger banks, but basically it's pretty much that you could feel maybe a little more comfortable because we don't have exotic investments. At the same time, as we know from what happened in 2008, the big banks are too big to fail and the government would bail them out anyway. So your money, which is insured by the FDIC to $250,000, probably there's not that much difference, but basically my attitude is always buy local, deal local. Dealing with a community bank would be dealing with a local bank.
Okay. Well, we go on to the perennial topic of education and financing education. This viewer is asking presently, what is the best way to save for my child's college education?
Well, basically, this is it's you're investing. So it would be the same philosophy we've always given. Number one, you should be somewhat diversified. Obviously, if you're talking about starting to save when the child was born, you're going to have more long-term view. If you're going to be talking when the child's going to go to college in 5 years, you'd be more short-term. So you're basically, primarily, you could be some real estate, which would again continue to turn off. Again, back to diversity, primarily stocks, but also more and more now you would consider having maybe a small percentage, maybe 10% combined in crypto and silver or gold. Again, a diversified portfolio, just like you would any other investment.
Okay. All right. The next question is from a viewer in the state that asks us, what is a straw man benchmark? Another phrase I've never heard of before.
Well, very frankly, neither have I. And doing research, it's a very strange thing that it's an index, but for some reason it's an index of Australia's largest companies, public companies. It makes no sense to me, and I've searched and searched,
I
and it
guess if
keeps
you're
coming back.
Australian, it might be of
It
interest.
might be of interest. So why straw man poll? It definitely is very emphatic that there's an ETF in Vanguard that is Australian major stocks, and that's a straw man poll. I don't
You
understand.
must be looking at possible investments in Australia.
Yeah. So, but this universal word, I don't understand.
Uh-huh. Okay. The next question is, how can I determine the quality of the custodian that my financial manager uses for my funds? And I want to start off by asking you if you'd please take a second and define what a custodian is.
A custodian obviously is somebody that holds the asset. So in this case, if you, when you have investments, you no longer get your shares and send it to your house, things like that. Your advisor would pick someone. In this case, it would be a large financial institution. The largest one is BNY Mellon, Pershing, which actually has $25 trillion held in custodian.
Wow.
Trillion.
Trillion.
It is unbelievably large. All the other major banks also have trillions. So probably be one of those. And because it's insured, because of the fact that it's held in a separate account, so how the financial institution does is irrelevant. It is basically very safe. And I wouldn't be concerned about your custodian unless you didn't have one of the large ones.
Okay. Okay. Our next question from our viewers is, what do you believe the future of the cruise industry will be after this pandemic? I'm uncertain whether I should invest in this industry or not.
Very frankly, simple statement, I don't think you should invest in it. It's a very high risk, high reward industry. There are so many things beyond their control. Obviously, the cruise companies are very efficient. They do a great job. However, it is going to be more and more the attitude, am I safe to go on the ship? Right now, they're supposedly doing well again. The last 2 years, they've lost unbelievable amounts of money. The largest cruise company is Carnival, and they have basically incurred a lot more debt because they've lost a tremendous amount of money. They've issued a lot more shares. So really what their value is today is very gray. And I just don't see any great upside. In any other crisis, they're going to have a problem again. So my answer is I don't think you should invest in the industry.
Okay. So if you're going to take a cruise, you should take one really soon.
Well, right now I understand the cruises are pretty busy again. But I would personally, and I use cruises quite a bit, I'm not rushing to go on a cruise right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now the next question is, why have our supply chains, this is something else in the news these days, why have our supply chains become so unreliable and slow over the last 2 years?
There's two reasons. The first one is government regulation. They continue, specifically in California, realizing that the port of Long Beach and the other small LA port is over 25% of the incoming imports, and as you well know, America
for the whole country.
For the whole country. And that basically they've tightened up the rules on the age of the trucks that can come into the port, and therefore that has eliminated some of the supply, because it was always very old trucks that went into ports because it was a short drive from the port to the rails to head.
Oh.
And so therefore there's no reason. You didn't put any miles in the truck. You used an old truck. And you waited a lot. You had a lot of waiting in line. So basically, this has restricted somewhat the use, and we know there's a shortage of labor in the country, and if you got it, a truck brought it. The logistics system is trucking, and trucking obviously is having trouble hiring.
Mm-hmm. Is that the pretty much that summarizes
that's pretty
the
basically.
major factors?
And also the other fact is that because of COVID, there's a lot of pent-up buying, and right now, volume of people buying is at an all-time high, and it is taxed the system, which is basically restrained by capacity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, going to the heart of international news right now, this viewer wants to know, what is the future of the Russian ruble, and will it ever be worth anything again?
Well, I would answer the question with a question: what is the future of Russia? What is the status? What's the war going to turn out? How is it going to affect the long term of the Russian economy? And since I don't know the answers to those questions, my answer to you is don't do anything with currencies, and definitely the Russian ruble is an at-risk currency.
Okay. Well, on the flip side of that is what is the unit of currency for the Ukraine? What is going to happen to it? And how can my wife and I show our support for this currency?
Well, first of all, if you want to support for the Ukrainian people, you wouldn't worry about their currency, very frankly. Actually, it's ironic. It's called something like the Hydrius or something. I can't pronounce it.
Hivner.
Hivner, okay. That anyway, it hasn't actually changed that much. In the beginning of a year ago, it was 3.6 cents. It went as high as 3.8 during the year. 2 months ago, it was 3.6 again, and right now it's 3.3. I cannot believe it's not lower in a country that may not exist, yet the currency has really been considered fairly stable. But if you want to really help people in Ukraine, there are a definite number of not-for-profits which are obviously trying to assist all that. We now have 1.2 million refugees already, and it's probably going to go to 4 or 5 million. So really it would be to help those who are helping the refugees probably. And if you want to really be magnanimous, is you could put your name in, and we start bringing them into this country, bring one into your home.
Okay, all right. Bring a Ukrainian family in and help.
Yes.
Okay, well, with that, we want to take a break, and we'll be right back after this message.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this episode, we are doing the Arnold Report with Mr. Ed Arnold, the president of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And let's return to our questions from our viewers, Mr. Arnold. This next one, again, is a reflection of the news that we are seeing all around us right now. I asked my financial manager to cut any Russian investments that I might have had. How may I check to make certain that my manager has done this?
My first thing is, if you don't trust your manager enough that when you give him a direct instruction that he doesn't follow it, you should fire him and get a new manager. But anyway, if you want to check on it, obviously you should be getting on a regular basis a copy of your portfolio of what you own. And the only other area you might own some ETFs or something, you might want to ask him to go into detail to see what those individual funds that you may have in your investment, if they would have something like that. And then you may want to get out of that fund. But basically, it shouldn't be a problem. There's not a lot of investments in Russia.
Okay. Next question is, due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, what investments should I steer clear of? What strategies should the smart investor use during a time of large-scale regional conflict in the world?
Well, I guess the biggest thing I'd say is don't invest in areas near the conflict. So obviously you wouldn't invest in Russia, Ukraine, but even the Eastern Europe countries, which are going to be affected. And Europe overall, because right now the cost of energy in Europe, natural gas, which is a major fuel obviously there, is up 11-fold in the last year. So therefore Europe's economy is going to be affected by the high cost of energy, just as ours is, but it's not as a percentage as great. Okay. So therefore, at this point, what is inflation going to affect, but specifically whatever is energy. Don't invest areas where energy will be a problem.
Okay. All right. The next question was one that has a bit of urgency to it. Our viewer said that this is a very important question for me, and I hope you will have time to answer it. The person writes, I inherited a large estate from my parents. It consists of stocks, bonds, CDs, bank accounts, and several properties. Please tell me what steps I should follow to protect my assets from massive taxation. How do I protect my assets from the local, state, and federal government? What is the best way to invest these funds for my future?
You need experts, specifically a lawyer, a good tax accountant, and obviously a good advisor. I mean, there's no question. If
Financial advisor.
Financial advisor. So overall, it is important. There's no way that I could address your individual because I don't know the details, and I wouldn't be qualified, very frankly. Tax is a very complicated world, but therefore that's why you need 3 different experts here. And therefore, with those, and obviously, like all investments, you want to be a diversified portfolio. You mentioned that you have some real estate. You may want to expand that real estate because real estate obviously is a good thing in times of inflation.
Okay, well, thank you. The next question is, would you please give us an update on the international cyber currency market? Which cyber currencies are performing the best at present?
Okay, well, basically, first of all, you have, as far as performing, it's all over the place. I just happen to take the top 5, not because of their performance, but just to show you what has happened in the market. The number 1 currency, which has always been, has been Bitcoin. That is the grandfather, the basis of.
And some people don't even use the term cyber currency; they just say Bitcoin.
Yes, that is right. It is synonymous. Well, Bitcoins, first of all, is by far they were as high as $1 trillion in value in a market that is possibly $2 trillion. So therefore, they were half the market.
Wow.
That they're basically. They continue to be a major, not quite as big as they were, but they are very, very big. Just a second here, I got my little sheet here. If I can find it, Charlie, we're not going to go there. Okay, basically, Bitcoins, just to give you a feeling for where it is, today is at 39,000 approximately. A year ago, it was at 49,000, so actually it's down. But 5 years ago, it was at 7,000. So you can see where it's up tremendously, over 500% in the last 5 years. It's not done as well recently. Ethereum has been a far better performer. That's the number 2 largest blockchain. And that basically is presently around $2,600. It was a year ago at $1,600, so you can see it's still up 60%, even though it's come down substantially.
So that's the number 2 cyber currency.
That's the number 2, and it was 140. It's up over 1,850%, way more. It went from 140 to 2,600 in the last 5 years. That basically Bitcoin's had a major move in October 2020. Ironically, Ethereum was in December 2020. Then your next one, ironic, is what they call a stable coin. Its price does not change. The idea of cryptocurrency is it is a method of transferring money and for communications of anybody in the world. So if you wanted to send money to somebody in Africa, if they had an account, you had an account, you could do it. Stable currency is backed by other assets, primarily US dollar or other things, and therefore it's always at $1.
How do the people that run it make any money?
They have fees.
Okay,
But it's very, very nominal. Like a bank might charge you 1% to transfer money. I'm just going to approximate number. They would be like 0.01% because it's very large. They have very low overhead. It's all technology, and therefore that is basically
Okay.
The next biggest one is a BNB, which, by the way, the one thing I did want to also mention is that Bitcoin is done through an algorithm. Right now, there are 19 million Bitcoins, and the maximum there will ever be is 21 million because the algorithm maxes out. That's the way it is.
There's a finite amount of Bitcoin.
Whereas Ethereum has an unlimited number. But Ethereum is
amount.
not just a transfer in money. It is contracts. It is all sorts of, it is a tool in the modern world. And Ethereum is, at this point, the strongest tool. That BNB also is one of those tools. It actually is maxed out. They have 165 million coins, and there'll be no more. And there, again, their movement has been, today they're around 310. They were at 230 a year ago, and they were 1,450 or 2,500 increase 5 years ago. So they've done very well. And the last one then, which is the top 5, is USD coin. And this, again, is a stable currency. It was $1, always remains $1. In this case, it's backed 100% by US dollars. And it is considered the most least controversial because of the assets backing it. It's audited by the government. It is transparent, which is not the case for Tether. So Tether has had some controversy. U.S. dollar, which is still much smaller, but it's gaining, is also very stable. So basically what you got to realize, the other thing that I think you would find interesting is, how can I own cryptocurrency?
Right.
The answer is you buy it through an exchange. There are a lot of exchanges. The cost would vary between 1% and 5%, especially big volume discounts. I'm going to disclose, I am a shareholder of Coinbase, which went public approximately in the last year. It's not done over well. It's a good company. It's doing fine. But the reason, and my wife actually does buy cryptocurrency on Coinbase. So not only I'm an owner of the thing, she's a user. But the reason I say pick this out, it's the largest for smaller people. It's the best for beginners. It's a public company, traded and audited. It reports to the IRS. It's very safe. It's Forbes' #1 partner. It does a large volume, and it trades in 100 different coins.
So all these exchanges are available on the internet to
Yes,
the
yes.
average person.
Yes, if you would look up cryptocurrency exchanges, you could find a whole list of them. A lot of them are definitely less expensive, but they're generally for high volume traders. So overall, that, as I have said in my earlier discussion, a small part of everybody's portfolio might want to be in crypto because the potential for substantial gains. Now, you could also lose it too. That's why it's a small amount.
So there was some question about what the future of cybercurrency would be. It looks like the cybercurrency is here to stay.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention, at the Olympics, you could buy things, anything there with Chinese cryptocurrency. You could also do it with dollars and, of course, euro and the Chinese regular currency. But the point is, they have been piloting cryptocurrency in China, and I'm sure theirs can be followed because China wants total control. And we, as the follow puppy of China, since we're controlled by them, basically will eventually have cryptocurrency and the dollar will cease. I believe this. How that's going to affect Bitcoin and other things, it could affect Bitcoins more so because it's a currency, whereas Ethereum has other uses, so I don't think it'll affect it.
There are many of us who would say that the ceasing of the dollar is going to be quite some time from now.
I don't think so.
Don't panic out there. Things won't change that fast, that quickly. The last question we have, Ed, is how can I convince my husband that an electric car is a terrible investment for the future? How is the development of hydrogen and natural gas vehicles coming along? Wouldn't they be a better buy?
The answer is they would not be a better buy. First of all, let's just get the history of it. To my surprise, I didn't realize this, we have been making hydrogen cars and selling them in this country. There's 2 manufacturers now, Toyota and Hyundai, but they're talking about 2,000-3,000 cars. That's all they're making, and they're only in California. Air Control Products makes hydrogen in California, a big plant. Obviously, hydrogen is not distributed elsewhere. The only gas stations that have hydrogen in the country are all both in California, Southern California and the San Francisco area. So if you were going to have a hydrogen car, it would have to be in California. According to one person's opinion, and a couple others actually, they all agree that it's not a good investment and it's not environmentally even sound. Now, will it be used in trucks, in stationary things, backup for alternative energy and things like this? Yes, there's possibly a future for hydrogen. The same with natural gas. Natural gas, again, very few stations in the country so therefore, it basically, you would lose your trunk, which is why I don't see it ever becoming a factor in a car. Again, in buses, 1/3 of the buses in the country right now, I believe, are using natural gas. They're the storage capacity. They get home every night. They're easy. They have their own charging station. So again, you need stations, and natural gas theoretically is less expensive, but its range is a factor, again, unless you would put a giant tank and then you'd have nothing else. So basically, the future in cars is electric. And I'm going to say that for 3 reasons, actually. There's new technology. Now, these are all future, but the future may be closer than we think, according to the articles. One of them is right now, the common way to mine, I guess you could still use it, call it mining, is you get the mineral, you put it in like a salt lake, a large lake, and let it evaporate, and then you scrape it off. But you only get 30% of the product, so it's not really efficient. And it takes several years to get for this lake to evaporate. So it's a very expensive, slow process. There is now a new method. There's two methods that are right now people are working on.
And
that
we have a minute and a half
yeah,
left.
90%, instead of 30% residual, you get 90%, and it would take a very short period of time to get it. So the cost of lithium, then the availability is going to increase substantially, and it should come down. However, the really big breakthrough, which again is called the forever battery, which is again a big secret. It's supposedly a hot investment. No comment. I did not pay for the report that would give you this hot investment. This is the size of a book, would give you a 1,000-mile range, and so therefore it would absolutely make the electric car the vehicle of the future. Plus, it would presently a battery cost about $20,000 a car. This would cost about $10,000. So
that's revolutionary.
That would be revolutionary. So if in fact any of these come about, and they're all supposedly going to come about the next several years, or maybe even next year or two. Even the improvement right now in electric cars, if you were to look at the advertisement on Mercedes, the 2024 Mercedes is going to have 620-mile range. So therefore, it happens to be a really pretty car. They're really totally redesigning it from scratch. But basically, there is a tremendous amount of improvement in technology in electric cars. There's no particular breakthroughs that I have seen. I couldn't find any in natural gas. It is what it is. And in the case of hydrogen, the way we produce it. And it uses a lot of energy to produce it.
Okay. All right. Well, we want to thank you for your answers today and sharing your expertise with our viewers. This is not an easy world to invest in or to follow finance, and we're very fortunate to have the expertise of someone like Mr. Arnold, and that he makes it available to all of us. So please send your questions in, and we'll see you next week on Behind the Headlines.